So we're going to be learning how to program in this course. Programming is just giving the computer a list of steps to complete. Think about if you're going to tell somebody who's sitting in their lounge chair what steps they had to take to get up and get in their car and drive away. Sounds simple. Get up, leave the house, drive away. But for the computer, you have to give much more detailed steps. So you'd have to say, stand up, right? How do you stand up from the chair? Then you have to find your keys. Where would you look for your keys? Then you'd have to open the door, right? Is the door locked? Is the door open to the left? Is there a screen door? Then you have to get to your car. Is the door locked? Do you have to click a button to open it? And then when you get in, how do you start it? You have to check your mirrors. There's a whole list of steps you have to take. And that's what we have to do when we're programming. Different programming languages and different environments require you to be much more detailed. Now, the thing about programming is some of those things are the same, right? The front door and the door to your car, they're all the same. They're doors, and you have to open them. And so if you write a program, if your programming language has a door component, it has all those functions built into it. Some languages have those components and some don't. Some allow you to build those and some don't. You have to program in each one of those details every time. Same thing like find your keys. Well, where were your keys? There's search functions that are in programming language, and you might have to say find keys and give it locations. We're going to be working in Python, and Python is a language that has a lot of flexibility in it. And that sounds good, but it also allows you to get into trouble. If you've programmed in other languages before, you will notice that we don't have to declare a variable before we can use it. We can just use a variable. We don't have to declare it as an integer or a string. We can just declare a variable and use it. And the other thing about Python is once we use it as an integer, we can convert it to a string. We can convert it to anything we want. It's flexible. It's strongly typed in that the variable can, once it has a type assigned to it, can only do certain things to it, unlike C, which is not strongly typed, and you can do multiple operations on different variables. But you can change the type in Python dynamically, which is something that's rare in most programming languages. And that, again, can get you into trouble. One of the other things about Python is you have to use indentations to mean something about looping and what code gets executed when. This is different than other programming languages that might use parentheses or braces or curly brackets. And at first it sounds really cool that you don't use the curly brackets and braces. And a couple weeks from now you'll learn to understand why those are in the other languages, because it makes Python really hard to figure out what's going on. Python was developed in the late 80s and released in the 90s, and I started working on it then. It's a really cool language, and it's really important these days. One of the reasons it's important these days is because its ability to gather huge data sets, read them in, manipulate them, and then write them out. If you take the second Python course in this series, we'll be reading large data sets in and then manipulating them, which is part of big data or data analytics. The other cool thing about Python is there's a huge number of libraries. It's sort of a chicken and an egg thing. Python is popular because there's a lot of libraries, and there's a lot of libraries because it's popular. So once a language becomes popular, everybody builds new libraries. So there's libraries for facial recognition, object recognition, sound, graphics, games. There's a whole bunch of libraries out there. We're going to use some of them in this course, and we're going to talk about other ones. It's a language that works well in an internet environment, and it is fairly small, so it doesn't take up a lot of space, which is one of the reasons it became popular. If you learn Python, a lot of the programming techniques will work with other languages and it will transfer to other languages, but there are some features of Python that are unique to Python, which is why people use it, that if you learn Python first, when you try to learn another language, you'll go, why do they do it that way? And if you're coming from another language, when you learn Python, you'll go, why do they do it that way in Python? As opposed to if you were learning Java and then learning some other languages. So Python is a very powerful language, but it's fairly easy to get started. So we're going to look at some of the introductory programs in this week and go from there.